Really excited to be here. So I'm going to kick off by just laying the groundwork of defining who the on-premise spirits consumer is, what they're drinking, where they're going. Speak to premiumization, but then more importantly, you will hear from the panel of brands themselves. So before I get into it, I just want to identify the five kind of key key frameworks or themes that we feel are shaping beverage alcohol in 2025. First, consumer recruitment is top of mind. How do you get Gen Z? So, consumer recruitment, we'll look at a few generational cuts today. Quality versus quantity, premiumization. How is the value perception landscape evolving? Delivery on experience. Experience is driving the on-premise, driving visitation. It is how brands get remembered. So how are you leaning into that? We know that macroeconomic headwinds are posing a challenge to the industry. And then health and wellness, that is not only taking shape via moderation, but also drink attributes that consumers are looking for. So top baseline, 52% of on-premise visitors could say that they consume spirits out of home, so at bars and restaurants. This survey data was collected just about a month ago. We do this every 6 months. So we'll be focusing on consumption over the last 3 months. So spirits is by far the largest beverage alcohol category, accounting for more dollars than beer and wine combined, actually. But there's definitely still headroom for growth when we talk about consumer penetration. So who are those drinkers? Pretty evenly split for gender, although we see that cocktail drinkers skew female and whiskey drinkers skew male. Looking at ethnicities, spirits could do a better job leaning into and really leveraging diversity. 3/4 of spirit drinkers are white. Tequila has been more successful recruiting African American and Hispanic drinkers, and it's no surprise that among the core spirit categories, tequila is gaining share. Looking at drink repertoire, so this is the number of categories that consumers drink in bars and restaurants, and also number of brands. On average, your typical consumer is consuming 5 categories, so that could be cocktails, vodka, craft beer, etc. For spirits drinkers, that number is 7. Looking at brands, the average consumer says they typically go to 11 brands when they drink out of home. Again, spirits drinkers over-index. So spirit brands need to be fighting harder to not only recruit drinkers to your category, but also stick out and recruit to your brands. So thinking back to that 52% number of people who say they drink spirits, we then break down into, okay, what spirits are you drinking? And we include cocktails as its own category. Somebody might be a margarita drinker, but not necessarily consume tequila as it's on its own. So looking back, trending over the last couple of years, really all spirit categories have done a good job recruiting consumers and are up pretty healthy margin versus 2 years ago, with 1/3 overall drinking cocktails. And looking at that from a generational perspective, it gets interesting. Gen Z is definitely over indexes on cocktails, tequila, vodka. I want to flag that whiskey might have somewhat of a Gen Z recruitment problem. It might be framed as your dad's spirit, whereas Gen X drastically under indexes on tequila. So we know cocktails are important. What cocktails do people say that they drink? Now, this is not sales. This is simply people saying that they've had the cocktail within the last 3 months. Margarita has been the #1 cocktail in the U.S. since we started tracking data. It over-indexes for tequila drinkers, obviously, but it under-indexes among Gen Z consumers, with pina coladas actually really popping for Gen Z, which, again, was an interesting call out. So we get asked a lot about visitation, especially with the economic climate today. We know that ticket count overall is down. However, average check value is up. So in general, consumers are visiting less frequently, but spending more money when they do visit. But when we look at spirit drinkers specifically, we still see really healthy visitation numbers. The average on-premise visitors are going out for a drink. About 1 in 4 say they do so weekly. That number is closer to 1 in 2 for spirit drinkers and for Gen Z, where you have 3/4 of spirit drinkers saying that they go out to eat at least once a week. So where are consumers going? There's a lot to digest here, but it's an interesting look. We have casual dining restaurants as number one. So this is saying that 82% of bar and restaurant visitors say that in the last 3 months they have visited a casual dining restaurant, and 74% of those say that they visit monthly, whereas 26% say they visit weekly. Then you have high energy venues, which could be defined as day clubs or nightclubs, while only 14% of on-premise visitors are frequenting those venues, 78% are doing so monthly. So you have really high frequency among those visitors. This is shifting to actual volumetric sales data for spirits. And we're looking at all spirit categories cut by price tier. Coming out of COVID, we saw, all of the growth was really driven by super premium and ultra premium. We've seen a little bit of a shift away from super premium, a little bit of polarization. You have some consumers who are still absolutely prioritizing that luxury spend on ultra and above, but premium, mostly driven by cocktail volume, is in growth and taking share from super premium. This is a different way to kind of look at premiumization that I really like. We give consumers a fixed amount of money and say, I don't know what it is, $50 you have to spend at a bar. Would you opt for 1 luxury super premium drink, 2 high quality drinks, and so on down to 5? And I index this for the average consumer versus the spirits drinker. You can see the average consumer is a little bit more spread, although we see a shift or a skew towards premiumization. The spirits drinker, overwhelmingly, nearly 1 in 2 say, yeah, I want the 2 high quality premium drinks. That's my sweet spot. So my final slide is a look at those consumers who say, yes, I'm likely to trade up, and what factors influence that trade up decision. And I think what's really relevant to today's audience and BCB is that those consumers, spirit consumers likely to trade up, are overwhelmingly more likely to engage with bar staff. So advocacy and that bar staff touch point is so critical. And those consumers we know also, they skew younger. They're Gen Z. They are very, they're seeking knowledge, and they're very impressionable. And I think that's really where brands can connect.